Tonight we drift east toward a frontier once marked by uneasy handshakes and unsigned death warrants, where Germany, in a move both bold and catastrophically miscalculated, decided to knock on Russia's front door in the middle of 1941 and got a snowball to the face in return. The air smells like wet earth and coal smoke. You're standing on the edge of Belarus in a landscape so flat you can see the curvature of ambition. The fields are peaceful now, but they're about to become the blood-soaked stage of one of history's most merciless dramas. You may feel brave, confident even until you remember there are 3.8 million German soldiers about to crash across this very line, like they're late for a party they weren't invited to. And the host, Stalin, not exactly a warm welcome. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know your location and local time down in the comments. It's always fascinating to see who else is drifting off with you tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're here on the eve of Operation Barbarossa, June 22nd, 1941, a date Stalin refused to believe would come, even as German divisions lined up like dominoes all along the western border. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, signed less than 2 years earlier, was supposed to guarantee peace, well, a fake peace between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. But as it turns out, Hitler wasn't big on keeping promises unless they were about expanding his empire. You might wonder why Stalin didn't prepare more. Historians still argue whether he was genuinely duped by Hitler's flattery or simply in denial, paralyzed by the thought of war before his military was fully purged and replaced by less than brilliant yes men. The opening moments feel like lightning. German panzers roar across the border at 3:15 a.m., their engines cutting through the mist like a bone saw. Luftwaffe bombers scream overhead, striking Soviet airfields before the Russian planes can even warm their engines. You walk through a fog of disbelief, villagers huddled around their radios, soldiers scrambling with rusty rifles, and bureaucrats already burning documents. It's a full-speed betrayal, and nobody, not even Stalin in his pajamas at the Kremlin, can believe it's really happening. 3 army groups drive east-north toward Leningrad center, toward Moscow, south toward Ukraine. The Germans think it will be over in a few months. You can almost hear their field commanders laughing, cigarettes, dangling boots clean. Russia's just a barn with no roof, they say, but you notice things they don't: roads turning to swamp after a single rain horse is pulling carts because tanks run out of gas, locals burning crops rather than letting the invaders eat. And the trees. So many trees. Russia has forests like Europe has opinions, dense, endless whispering in a language only old men and lost armies understand. A lone birch leaf flutters down beside you, landing atop a Soviet soldier's helmet, now lying alone in the mud. Already, the war is personal. The Germans press eastward like it's a road trip, pausing to admire cathedrals in Vilnius or loot paintings from palaces in Minsk. But here's a quirky tidbit: many Wehrmacht officers brought along winter coats. High command told them not to bother. The war would be over by October. So those coats were stacked in warehouses in Poland, gathering dust, while their owners would soon freeze. Meanwhile, Stalin disappears for 10 days. That's not a metaphor. He literally hides in his dacha, stunned. The Red Army is collapsing faster than his nerves. Officers are executed for retreating. Others are executed for not retreating fast enough. You walk past entire Soviet divisions captured in a single afternoon. 500,000 men marched westward like ants. One German diary entry reads, "If this continues, the war will be over in 6 weeks." Famous last words. But already resistance is fermenting in the soil. Soviet snipers hide in haystacks, blowing out tires instead of brains to halt convoys. Railway lines mysteriously explode the moment supplies are needed. Whole towns vanish into the forest, joining partisan groups that live like ghosts and strike like wasps. You meet a babushka handing out potato soup and grenades in equal measure. She calls you my grandson, even though you're clearly not related. And as the weeks pass, the mood begins to change. The Germans keep winning battles, but the Soviets refuse to admit defeat. Moscow radio keeps broadcasting. Stalin re-emerges with a gravelly speech. Brothers and sisters, our cause is just victory will be ours. The people believe him not because he's warm, but because there's no one else to believe. Now it's mid-September. The wind smells different. There's a sharpness to the air, a warning. The leaves begin to yellow, then fall. You kneel to tie your boot and find frost on the grass. The soldiers around you look up nervously. It's just autumn, one says. The Russians can't fight anyway, says another. But as you rise, you spot a crow on a fence post staring at you like it's waiting for something cold, something cruel, something German soldiers did not train for. You wake to the sound of boots sloshing through something that used to be a road, but now resembles chocolate pudding. Welcome to the Russian mud season. It's October, and what the Germans called Blitzkrieg lightning war has hit something more powerful than any Soviet division, the soggy reality of Eastern Europe. Tanks meant to glide across open plains now sink axle deep into slush. You try helping a soldier yank his boot free from the mud, only to lose your own in the process. Somewhere behind you a staff car growls, impotently stuck on a slope that wouldn't faze a mule. Still the Wehrmacht presses on. They've captured Kiev and are closing in on Smolensk. You walk beside them as they chew up mile after mile of countryside, dragging behind miles-long supply lines that grow thinner and more desperate with each passing day. The roads are clogged with wagons, ambulances, and overheated tanks. And horses. So many horses. Germany, the modern mechanized juggernaut, still relies on over 600,000 of them to move supplies. You spot one soldier trying to warm his hands on the beast's flank. He's from Bavaria, has never seen this kind of landscape, and has started calling birch trees enemy snipers in disguise. Back in Berlin, High Command insists victory is near. Hitler himself spreads out maps like he's choosing a wallpaper pattern. Just a few more weeks, he says. Capture Moscow before the snow. But you're here on the ground watching the air turn sharper by the hour. The Soviet Union is wounded but not broken. Its defenders are now fighting with something cold and ancient, a kind of grim resolve that doesn't show up on radio transmissions. The Red Army has learned. Their tanks, clunkier, slower, handle the terrain better. Their uniforms are wool-lined. Their troops fight like they expect to die, but intend to take you with them. And now the weather joins the fray. Cold fronts sweep across the steppes without warning. One night you sleep in a barn with a handful of German grenadiers. By morning, one of them has frozen to death inside his greatcoat. His breath never left his mouth, just a brittle smile carved by frost. Historians still debate whether the Germans could have taken Moscow had they started earlier or bypassed Ukraine entirely. But hindsight's cheap and Russia's roads are not. Mud slows the army. Bridges collapse under retreating Soviet engineers. Supply trucks stall for lack of fuel. You pass a group of shivering soldiers roasting a rat on a bayonet Siberian chicken. They joke. Laughter still exists, but it's brittle now, like glass before a crack. You'd think the Luftwaffe could help flying overhead to blast supply lines or clear paths, but even the skies betray the invaders. Low clouds, early snows, and icing engines keep planes grounded. German mechanics try to scrape ice off wings with spoons and shouting. You meet a pilot in a foxhole grounding himself after crashing a third time. The clouds have sides, he mutters. Meanwhile, the Soviet defense lines near Moscow harden. Reinforcements arrive, fresh divisions from Siberia, lean and quiet, wearing thick white coats. Stalin moved them west only after confirming Japan wouldn't invade from the east. These troops, stoic, trained in sub-zero survival, look more like ghosts than men. One gives you a slice of frozen bread and stares straight through you. You're not sure he even blinks. Still, German generals plead for winter gear. The answer from Berlin, you won't need it. So they wrap themselves in curtains, tablecloths, even straw-stuffed jackets taken from dead villagers. You walk through a camp where officers are trading watches for boots. Frostbite claims fingers before bullets do. One soldier writes home, Tell mother I lost my toes, but not my courage. It's signed in pencil, his ink froze. Quirky fact time: some German tanks literally refused to start unless fires were lit under them first. You see it happen: a squad crouched around a panzer with flaming logs beneath its belly. It looks less like an army and more like a primitive ritual. The machine finally grumbles to life, belching smoke like it's offended to be here. And Moscow looms. You can see the faint glow of its factories on the horizon. Soviet civilians dig tank traps in the streets, build barricades of furniture and books, and train with wooden rifles. Patriotic songs play from loudspeakers, drowning out the whispers of fear. A woman hands you a pamphlet and a rock. One to read, one to throw, she says. And so the lightning war becomes a crawling war. The Germans are still advancing technically, but it's a Pyrrhic progress. Every mile costs more lives, more boots, more faith. The snow begins to fall, not softly, but like a punishment. Thick, wet flakes that soak through canvas tents and freeze weapons in their holsters. One night you help a soldier break his rifle free from a block of ice with a brick. By morning it's frozen again. The front lines blur. Are they 30 kilometers from Moscow or 40? It depends who you ask and whether they still have a working compass. German morale drops. Soviet resolve rises. The wind no longer whistles, it roars. You stand in a forest that smells of pine and smoke and fear, watching the first real blizzard roll in. And just like that, the war shifts. Not with a bang, but with a shiver. The air smells scorched like a fireplace gone rogue. You're somewhere in Western Russia now, maybe near Vyazma or Kaluga, it's hard to tell. The trees have been burned down to black stumps, the rail tracks twisted like spaghetti. Welcome to the charred zone between what Germany thinks it controls and what the Soviets have already decided they're taking back. You pass through villages that look like graveyards, though there are no bodies, only soot-shattered icons and the strange quiet of deliberate destruction. This is Stalin's scorched earth policy in full effect. Retreating Red Army units leave nothing behind. Not food, not shelter, not even a decent latrine. They blow bridges, flood fields, and rip up railroads with almost gleeful spite. You watch a group of engineers laughing as they turn a perfectly usable train station into a pile of bricks. One of them says, "We'd rather freeze than feed the fascists." You believe him. You also believe the German soldiers behind you slipping through mud and chewing on raw beets would kill for even one of those bricks. And it's not just physical damage. The Soviets destroy information. 2 road signs, flipped maps, redrawn telegraph wires, sliced mid-sentence. You follow a German courier lost on a country path for 2 hours before he gives up and starts asking a pig for directions. The pig does not respond, but it might still have better intel than Berlin, which still insists Moscow is within reach, maybe with stilts. Historians still argue whether the Red Army's sabotage was strategic genius or sheer desperation. But there's no debate about the result. Germany's momentum, once blistering, now limps. Trains can't run, trucks can't move, troops can't find anything to eat but mouldy apples and snow. You spot soldiers peeling bark off trees, boiling it with bayonets. One of them tries to fry a leather glove. You do not ask how it tastes. Then there's the human toll. Refugees shuffle past you mothers, dragging children, old men, pushing wheelbarrows filled with nothing but saucepans and family portraits. Some villages evacuate on sleds, others on foot. And sometimes, not at all. You pass one house that's been padlocked shut from the outside. There's a note on the door, "Do not open. Typhus." You don't open it. In one ruined town, a Red Army commander orders the entire grain store torched, even as hungry villagers protest. He says, "Better ash in your mouth than meat in a German's bowl." The barn explodes 20 minutes later. That night, the wind carries the smell of burnt wheat across 40 kilometers. You taste it in your dreams. But not all of Stalin's tactics are about retreat. He orders factories in the west dismantled bolt by bolt and shipped east by train. 500 entire industrial complexes moved to the Urals and beyond. You ride beside one such shipment, a steelworks from Dnipro, crammed into boxcars, escorted by teenage workers and machine parts held together with string. By the time the Germans reach the city, it's a ghost, every useful tool gone, even the screwdrivers. All that's left is graffiti. Try harder, comrades. We already moved the future. Meanwhile, the Red Army begins to change. Less chaos, more coordination. You watch new recruits drilling with wooden rifles waiting for real ones to arrive. Girls in headscarves carry ammo. School teachers become snipers. You hear of a grandmother in Belarus who claimed to have shot 5 officers from her outhouse window. The accuracy is debated. The pride is not. Quirky tidbit time. Did you know Soviet engineers sometimes built fake towns to fool German bombers? Whole phantom villages made of canvas hay and colored plywood laid out just far enough from real targets. From the air, they looked legit. From the ground, they looked like a theater set designed by someone with a grudge and a bottle of vodka. You stumble into one by accident and nearly applaud until you realize the flak batteries are real. Supply lines continue to wither. The further Germany advances, the more fragile it becomes. Roads that were already bad become unusable. Railways sabotaged with bent spikes derail entire shipments. You sit beside a German officer reading a schedule that no longer matches reality. He throws it into a fire and mutters something about paper wars. And all the while the cold creeps in like a rumor. Every day it lingers a bit longer in your fingertips. Every night it waits a bit closer to your boots. The soldiers you march with begin to speak in shorter sentences. Their faces crack from windburn. Laughter is rare now, and when it comes it sounds like breaking glass. The ground itself fights back. You help dig a trench and hit permafrost before your shovel reaches your ankles. German artillery shells get stuck in frozen mud before they can even explode. Horses drop where they stand, unable to find water that isn't ice. One soldier carves, "Tell Elsa I'm sorry," into a fence post before dying of exposure. No one knows who Elsa is, maybe not even him. As you pass another derailed train, its cargo frozen mid-unload, you start to feel it deep in your bones. This isn't just war, it's attrition by environment. The land doesn't care who wins, it just wants you to leave. Your breath fogs into little ghosts as you step into Leningrad, or what's left of it. You've crossed a long lake road, frozen solid, lined with the cracked remnants of trucks that didn't make it. The wind shrieks like it knows you shouldn't be here. The city itself doesn't groan or scream, it simply endures. You hear no gunfire, no shouting. Just the eerie silence of a metropolis learning how to survive without food, heat, or mercy. The Germans have surrounded Leningrad, not stormed it, no, that would be too generous. They're content to starve it into surrender. What follows is not a siege in the medieval sense with ladders and battering rams. This is a slow noose tightening with every day. No bread, no fuel, no hope of escape, just ration cards, frozen potatoes, and the sound of your neighbor chewing something suspicious. Historians still debate the motives behind the siege. Was it strategy or sheer cruelty? Hitler reportedly said he didn't want to occupy Leningrad, he wanted it erased. Yet the city held out for 900 days. You walk past a wall pocked with bullet holes where a poem still clings in frostbitten ink, "We are still here." That's not defiance. That's defrosted fury. You visit a communal apartment, one of thousands. It houses 40 people in 3 rooms with a stove that hasn't worked since September. A teenage girl named Tatiana offers you a teaspoon of jam. It's all she has left. You sit beside her as she reads Pushkin aloud, wearing 3 scarves and a coat made from curtains. The jam tastes like sunlight. Quirky tidbit: people in Leningrad ate wallpaper, not for flavor, of course. The paste contained starch, and that meant calories. Others boiled leather belts, brewed shoe soles into soup. You attend one such dinner. The smell is unforgettable, like wet dog and antique store. No one complains. Complaints use energy. The city adapts in ways no invader could anticipate. Artists still paint. Musicians still rehearse. The Leningrad Philharmonic famously performs Shostakovich's 7th Symphony, the Leningrad Symphony, in the midst of the siege. The musicians are so weak They collapse between movements, but the performance is broadcast across the front lines through loudspeakers as if to say, "We're still making art and you're still freezing." You follow a group of school children to class, yes class. Their teacher has no chalk, no paper, no books, just her voice. She teaches algebra while the walls around her thrum with artillery. One boy raises his hand and asks, "What happens when X equals hunger?" The teacher does not cry. She can't afford to lose that much salt. The dead pile up not just from shells but from cold and starvation. You pass cart after cart dragging frozen bodies to mass graves. Some are wrapped in rugs, some are not wrapped at all. It becomes routine mechanical, a job like any other. You meet a woman who has buried all 5 of her children. She now tends to orphans as if they were houseplants, quiet, steady, unwavering. And yet, despite the horror, the city fights back. Anti-aircraft guns are manned day and night. Snipers perch in cathedral towers. Children volunteer as fire watchers. A 12-year-old girl shows you how to identify incendiary bombs by their sound. "The hissing ones are liars," she says. "Ignore those." She's probably quoting her grandfather or inventing wisdom to survive. By now, the German commanders outside the city are frustrated. They drop leaflets promising food and safety if civilians evacuate. Few believe them. Those who do are often shot. You see one such leaflet fluttering across a snowy square. A woman picks it up, reads it, and then uses it to plug a drafty window. The Soviet government manages to resupply the city barely through the road of life, a supply route that stretches across the frozen Lake Ladoga. Trucks risk shelling and thin ice to bring in flour and ammunition. You ride in one convoy watching drivers toss boots out the windows to check the road ahead for cracks. If the boot sinks, the truck turns around. If the boot slides, you press forward and pray the tires do the same. One night, a bakery is bombed and the scent of fresh bread fills a 5-block radius. People run into the ruins not to find survivors, but to inhale. One woman tells you it's the best thing she's smelled in a year. Then she faints from exhaustion. Even amid this despair, bureaucracy persists. You observe a ration line stretching through a snowstorm. A clerk insists that a woman's card is invalid. She insists her children are hungry. Neither budges. Eventually, she walks away with a crust of black bread and eyes that weigh 5 kilograms. And still Leningrad does not fall. The German guns pound it daily, but the people move underground into cellars and subway tunnels. An old man jokes that he hasn't seen daylight since the Tsar abdicated. You believe him if only for the poetry of it. By the end of the first winter, over 500,000 residents are dead. But the city still breathes barely but stubbornly. It becomes not just a location, but a symbol. Stalin exploits it for propaganda. The West praises its endurance. You simply feel its heartbeat slow and ragged like someone in deep sleep, dreaming of summer. And through it all, the snow keeps falling. Not gently, not romantically, just relentlessly. You brush ice from a statue of Pushkin and find a scarf tied around its neck. Someone thought he looked cold. You blink against the blinding white of the Russian steppe somewhere near Moscow now, and the wind carves straight through your coat like it knows your weaknesses. The calendar says December 1941, but time here feels like it's frozen, literally and figuratively. German troops have reached the outer limits of the Soviet capital just 30 kilometers away. From some hills you can see the faint outline of spires and smokestacks in the distance. But reaching the city, that's another story entirely. The Wehrmacht is exhausted. The men are ragged, hungry and freezing. Their weapons jam, their trucks stall, their gloves don't exist. You pass a soldier trying to light a fire inside a helmet. It doesn't work, but he keeps trying anyway. When asked how far they've advanced, one German officer jokes, 3 fingers and 2 of them have frostbite. Historians still debate whether Hitler truly believed he could conquer Moscow before the snow. Maybe he thought the Red Army would simply crumble. Maybe he believed his own press releases. Or maybe he just underestimated Russia's favorite General Winter. Because as the Germans inch closer to the capital, a deep freeze wraps around them like a steel blanket. Temperatures drop below -40. Gun barrels crack when fired. Oil turns to jelly. You watch a horse freeze mid-step like a statue, icicles hanging from its lashes. Inside Moscow, panic once teetered on the edge of eruption. But now a strange resolve settles in. Stalin has refused to leave the city. He gives speeches on the radio. He walks through factories and metro tunnels flanked by guards, and bundled in a wool overcoat that looks like it was stolen from a bear. You hear him growl, "We will not surrender Moscow, not 1 inch." You're not sure who he's talking to, maybe God, maybe Hitler, maybe himself. But Stalin isn't the only one refusing to back down. Moscow's civilians dig tank traps and build barricades out of sandbags and furniture. Ballet dancers stitch camouflage nets. University students plant mines. The whole city becomes a defensive organism, every block a cell in a much larger frozen beast. One woman tells you, "If the Germans come, I'll stab them with a knitting needle." She means it. The Red Army, battered and retreating just weeks ago now, regroups. You walk among fresh divisions arriving from the east, where they had been guarding against Japan. With Tokyo's intentions neutralized, Stalin ships them west. These troops are the Siberians, tall, stoic, and terrifyingly quiet. They wear white snow capes, ski with rifles, and move like shadows. One offers you a swig of something that might be antifreeze. You decline. He drinks anyway. Quirky tidbit. Siberian troops used to train in temperatures so cold their eyelashes would freeze shut during drills. They considered Moscow mild. That's like calling lava a bit toasty. You overhear one Siberian sergeant mutter, "Warm enough to shoot straight." His men laugh exactly once. Back on the German side, things are not going well. Most of the troops have no winter clothing. Requests for parkas and insulated boots go unanswered. Hitler refuses to prioritize supplies over symbolic victory. "Hold your ground," he commands. No retreat. Easy for him to say from his heated headquarters. You watch an officer wrap his feet in newspaper. It doesn't help. You watch another trader watch for a dead comrade's boots. That helps, but it doesn't feel like winning. German tanks are now being heated with bonfires before they can start. One catches fire mid-operation, the crew leaping out like popcorn. Machine guns freeze scopes. Fog radios die. You walk through a field where a group of soldiers are beating their rifles against a tree trying to knock off the ice. The tree wins. Soviet planes begin to appear in the sky, dropping bombs and leaflets. The leaflets say, "You came for glory, but found frost." One German soldier pins his to the inside of his coat for insulation. Another uses his as toilet paper, then gets frostbite. He does not laugh. The tide begins to shift. The Soviets launch a counter-offensive on December 5th. You feel it like a vibration in your chest. Infantry pour from trenches, screaming in Russian and firing from skis. Tanks, newer, sturdier ones, roll across the frozen ground like iron beasts. The Germans are caught off guard. They thought the Soviets couldn't attack in winter. Turns out they've been waiting for winter. You follow a skirmish near Klin. German officers shout orders that no one hears over the wind. A supply line collapses. Trucks are abandoned. Soldiers retreat on foot, dropping equipment just to move faster. One writes a note and buries it in the snow. "Forgive us. We were not prepared." And inside Moscow, church bells ring again, not for mass, but for morale. You sit with a group of workers listening to the echo as they sip something warm and questionable from tin mugs. One of them jokes, "If the Germans want Moscow, they'll have to sleep in the metro." He gestures to the tunnel where entire families now live, their children playing hopscotch beside anti-tank barriers. Despite the hardship, there's a strange beauty in the snow-draped chaos. Fires glow from chimneys, icicles glitter like chandeliers. A soldier sculpts a snowman with a captured German helmet. Another gives it a cigarette. You want to laugh, but your face is too numb. The Germans finally begin to pull back, unofficially, hesitantly. Some units refuse to retreat and are obliterated. Others vanish into the woods. You pass one group burying their dead under pine branches. No time for graves. The trees will have to remember for them. And still the snow falls, each flake a silent witness. Each gust of wind a reminder you do not conquer Russia. You endure it, or you don't. You wake one morning and everything is white. The sky, the ground, the trees, your eyebrows. Even the sound seems frozen. Welcome to the next phase of the war, the one where General Winter stops flirting and starts showing his teeth. The cold is no longer just inconvenient. It's tactical. It's lethal. It's now wearing a Soviet uniform and fighting on Stalin's side. You trudge through a German encampment on the edge of the Kalinin front, or what used to be an encampment. Now it's a scatter of canvas rags barely clinging to their stakes, a few overturned mess tins, and the unmistakable silence of frostbitten failure. A man huddled by the skeleton of a stove is trying to warm his hands by whispering to them. "Stay with me," he mutters to his own fingers, as if they were old friends ready to betray him. Historians still debate whether Germany's defeat was due more to strategic overreach or environmental disaster, but to the soldiers on the ground it doesn't matter. You watch one try to open a can of beans with a bayonet. The blade snaps. The beans are frozen. He eats them anyway, cracking them like candy from hell. Let's be clear. Winter is not just a backdrop here. It is an active participant. German tanks, those proud panzers that had once thundered through France, now refuse to start unless fires are lit underneath them like moody dragons that need a bedtime story. You pass a team of mechanics in wool coats and sheer desperation hunched around a frozen transmission, rubbing it like it's a magic lamp. Nothing happens. The genie, it seems, froze to death last week. By contrast, the Soviets are built for this. You walk alongside a detachment of ski troops gliding silently across snowdrifts. Their breath fogs only briefly before disappearing into the grey. They wear quilted jackets, white cloaks, felt boots. They sleep under fir boughs and melt snow in tin cups. One even offers you a boiled potato. It tastes like victory, or maybe just calories. Quirky fact, some Red Army troops wore padded sunflower seed sacks under their uniforms for insulation. They called them zashivayki, stuffed garments that turned your average peasant into a portable furnace. German troops, in contrast, began wrapping themselves in curtains, looted furs, and even straw. You once see a captain wearing a theatre costume from a pillaged opera house. He looks like Napoleon and cries like a child. Soviet snipers thrive in this weather. They set up in barns, tree lines, even inside snowbanks. You meet one named Lyuba, short for Lyubov, meaning love. She paints her rifle white and waits up to 2 days for a single shot. When asked how many Germans she's killed, she smiles and says, "Enough to make it quiet again." You don't ask twice. German morale shatters like ice under a boot heel. Soldiers begin deserting in 2s and 3s. Some simply stop moving. You pass one man sitting on a log with his boots off, staring at his own feet as if they'd betrayed him. They have. He never moves again. Another soldier insists he sees wolves following the unit. You laugh nervously until you see the tracks too. The Red Army pushes forward, slowly, methodically. They don't chase the retreating Germans, they encircle them, cutting supply lines, choking divisions into submission. Soviet engineers lay mines disguised as snowballs. Artillery is camouflaged with white-painted branches. Even the trees seem complicit. You brush snow from a pine and find a machine gun nest smiling back. And yet there are moments, tiny, ridiculous moments that break the dread. A Russian soldier finds a harmonica in a ruined farmhouse and plays Kalinka until the frostbite says no. A German trooper finds a cat curled inside his helmet and names it Kaiser. Someone builds a snowman holding a bayonet. No one shoots at it. It looks too tired. On the German side, discipline begins to collapse. Commanders order attacks that go nowhere. Soldiers dig trenches only to abandon them overnight. Fuel freezes in barrels. Guns seize mid-fire. You find a warehouse with crates of wool socks that never made it to the front. One soldier sees them and cries not out of gratitude, but because they arrived 2 months too late. You hitch a ride with a Soviet supply sled horses too precious to lose, guarded by riflemen who look like they haven't blinked since September. They speak little, eat less, and yet somehow move forward. "The land loves us," one of them mutters. She remembers who belongs. He gestures behind him. They don't. German propaganda continues to insist that Moscow is within reach, but you walk past frozen corpses facing west, not east. That tells a different story. The retreat begins not in an orderly strategic fashion, but in slow, painful bursts. Commanders scream for more trucks. There are none. Wounded are left behind. You watch a medic kiss his patient goodbye and leave him with a single cigarette. Don't waste it, he says. And still winter is not done. A blizzard hits during one Soviet assault, reducing visibility to inches. Both sides lose their bearings. One unit gets lost and sets up camp in its own trench. Another walks in a circle for 6 hours. You walk with them. Nobody notices. One man writes in his diary, "I miss mud." At least you could move in mud. But through this blinding storm, the Soviet machine grinds forward. Factory workers from the Urals send reinforcements, new rifles, boots, artillery. Fresh conscripts arrive daily. Some don't even have helmets, but they have purpose. Stalin's new rallying cry echoes, "Not one step back." And they don't. Even when the snow buries the road, even when the wind tries to shove them backward, they keep going. The Germans finally realize they are not being pushed back by an army alone, but by a landscape, a climate, and a people who will not die quietly. And as you look to the horizon where the white sky meets the white earth, you understand what every invader has learned. Too late, Russia does not defeat you with might alone. It wears you down, it breaks your boots, it freezes your trigger finger. And then, just when you think it might let up, it snows harder. You slip into Stalingrad through a break in the rubble, careful not to trip over what used to be a factory wall. The city doesn't look like a battlefield. It looks like a place where war has moved in and filed a change of address form. Brick dust floats in the air like snow, except this snow makes your throat burn. Every building is half a building. Every street is a trench. Every window is a gun barrel waiting to blink. This is where steel and will collide and where Hitler's obsession meets Stalin's refusal. Stalingrad isn't just a city, it's a symbol. Named after the Soviet leader himself, it becomes a line in the frostbitten sand. The Germans must take it. The Soviets must hold it. And you get to witness what happens when both sides decide not to blink. The German Sixth Army, led by General Paulus, arrives in late summer 1942. They expect to capture the city quickly. Why not? They've done it before. Kharkov fell, Kiev fell, Minsk crumbled. But as you walk alongside them down Stalingrad's boulevards, now paved with bricks and broken promises, something feels different. The resistance here doesn't bend, it splinters and stabs. Soviet defenders fight from basements, chimneys, sewers. You crawl through a drain pipe and find a machine gun nest manned by teenagers. One waves, you wave back. He goes back to shooting. Every building is contested floor by floor, sometimes room by room. There's a name for this Rattenkrieg, rat war, and you are deep in the maze. Historians still debate whether Hitler's fixation on Stalingrad was strategic or just stubborn vanity. Some say he wanted to humiliate Stalin. Others claim it was about controlling the Volga River and the oil fields to the south. Whatever the reason, the fight becomes personal, and that makes it dangerous. Armies can retreat, egos usually can't. You duck into a factory, the Red October Steelworks. Once it forged tractors and farm tools, now it forges snipers. Bullets are made on one floor while grenades are thrown from the other. You spot a lathe still running beside a corpse. A worker, laborer turned soldier offers you a cigarette with oil-stained fingers. We're still producing, he grins, even if it's mostly anger. Quirky tidbit, many Soviet soldiers here had only 2 days of training. Some were given rifles with no bullets. Take from the dead, they were told. One soldier you meet clutches a rifle like it's a lifeline and a curse. He hasn't blinked in 3 days. He offers you a sip from his canteen. It's not water. It's vodka, thinned with snowmelt and defiance. Snipers become legends here. The most famous is Vasily Zaitsev, a former shepherd from the Urals. He racks up dozens of confirmed kills, often within whispering distance. You follow him through rubble and see how he turns shadows into hiding places. He once disguised himself as a corpse for an entire day just to kill one officer. He jokes that the flies were the worst part, and the Germans. they're not giving up either. Artillery rains down hourly. You learn to sleep in 20-second intervals between shell bursts. Their tanks advance up streets only to be ambushed by Molotov cocktails dropped from balconies. A unit captures a building at noon and loses it by dusk. One German officer writes in his journal, "This is no longer war, this is the end of things." And winter, of course, returns to the party. Snow begins to fall again. Fires burn just to keep frostbite away. Food becomes fantasy. Horses vanish either eaten or exploded. You pass a Soviet soldier gnawing on a bootlace like it's pasta. He offers to share. You decline. Supply chains collapse on both sides. The Germans are hungry, the Soviets are starving. You see ration fights break out over spoiled potatoes. At one point, German soldiers try to airdrop supplies, but half the crates fall into Soviet hands. One crate contains nothing but condoms. A Red Army trooper inflates one and wears it on his helmet. It becomes the division's unofficial mascot. Still no one retreats. Hitler forbids Paulus to pull back. Stalin gives no inch either. The city becomes a blender. It chews up men, metal, and morale. You step over a courtyard where a fountain used to be. Now it's a crater, surrounded by shattered helmets and torn boots. No birds sing, no dogs bark. Only the wind, and even that seems cautious. You meet a woman who has been living in a pantry for 3 months. Her family's gone. She teaches you how to boil wallpaper again with the starch trick. She smiles when you gag. You'll get used to it, she says. You won't. And then a shift. Not in strategy, but in tension. The Germans start looking over their shoulders more often. Whispers swirl encirclement reinforcements, rumors of a Soviet trap. You feel it in your boots. The ground doesn't just shake from bombs anymore. It trembles with the weight of something big coming. But for now it's still Stalingrad, still destruction, still a chessboard of corpses and cracked concrete. You lean against a shattered wall and try to catch your breath. A Soviet nurse passes you, dragging a sled full of limbs. She nods. "Busy day?" she says. You nod back. She disappears into the snow. By now you realize something simple and terrible. This city doesn't want heroes. It wants survivors, and even they are starting to look like ghosts. The snow crunches underfoot like brittle glass as you move northwest of Stalingrad, past the twisted ruins of villages you can't name anymore. Everything smells of soot and boiled canvas, but something's changed in the air, something electric like the pause before a thunderclap. The Soviets are planning something. You feel it in the silence between shellfire. You see it in the way troops whisper less and dig more. The ground is hiding more than trenches now. This is the calm before Operation Uranus. And if that sounds like a cosmic joke, don't worry. The punchline's all German. It's November 1942 and the Red Army is about to do what Hitler thought impossible: launch a massive coordinated counterattack across 2 flanks of the German 6th Army, whose forces are dug into Stalingrad like ticks on a frozen dog. And the Soviets won't strike the Germans head-on. No, they're aiming for the weak points, the Romanian and Hungarian troops guarding the rear, under-equipped and shivering in mismatched boots. Historians still argue whether German intelligence failed outright or whether Hitler simply ignored it again. Either way, you're standing in the middle of a brewing disaster. The Axis command believes the Soviets are too drained to attack. Meanwhile, you watch Soviet engineers lay down railway lines in silence. Troops mass behind tree lines and supply trucks roll eastward, like blood, into a clenched fist. Then it begins. November 19th. The southern front erupts. First artillery shells pour across the horizon like a sunrise from hell. You flinch as the earth heaves, but the Soviet troops move forward with terrifying calm. You walk among them as they advance in lines, sometimes shoulder to shoulder, singing softly beneath their breath. It's not a march, it's a reclaiming. Kazakh cavalry appears. Yes, actual horsemen, galloping across frozen plains like the calendar forgot to flip. Most have never seen tanks before. Doesn't matter. They slice through Axis lines with sabers and sheer audacity. You pass a German forward post that now contains nothing but shattered rifles and one confused mule. "Where are the tanks?" a Romanian soldier asks as he flees. Behind the horses, someone mutters. By November 23rd, the Soviets close the circle. The German Sixth Army, over 250,000 men, is trapped inside Stalingrad. The encirclement is complete. You stand on a hill and look down into the snow-choked basin where they're now sealed like a jar of spoiled pickles. Soviet commanders shake hands. One of them lights a cigarette and says, "Now we wait." Inside the pocket, panic sets in. General Paulus sends frantic telegrams to Hitler requesting permission to break out. The answer is classic Führer fantasy: hold your ground. Supplies are coming by air. You watch the Luftwaffe try. Airdrops miss. Crates smash. Planes crash. Out of desperation, one drop includes cooking oil and accordion parts. A soldier sobs when he opens it. Quirky tidbit: you find a German report detailing airdropped items that included chocolate and brass knuckles. It's unclear who thought this was helpful. Probably someone warm, safe, and very far away. You walk through makeshift German hospitals, cold, crowded, and silent. The wounded lie in rows, some still in uniform, others wrapped in scraps of wallpaper. Morphine is gone. Water is a miracle. One doctor uses vodka to sterilize a bone sore, then drinks the rest. For balance, he says. The Soviets tighten the circle. Snipers pick off runners. Artillery grinds down resistance. You pass a captured German trench where the bodies haven't fallen, they've frozen in place, as if pausing mid-command. One has a spoon in his hand. You wonder what his last bite tasted like. But not all Soviets are celebrating. You meet a unit of Siberian infantry who've been fighting non-stop for 72 hours. Their officer says they've taken the same building 3 times, lost it twice. This war is a mirror, he says. It shows you your face. And then punches it. You nod, not quite sure if that's poetry or concussion. Inside Stalingrad, things decay fast. Horses are eaten, dogs too, then wallpaper. You see a man drag a suitcase through a destroyed trolley depot, inside sugar cubes and his mother's ashes. "I'll need both," he explains. Outside the ring, the Soviets build walls of defense, knowing the Germans might try to break in or out. They don't. Hitler forbids it. General Manstein's relief attempt fizzles after brief progress. The Red Army holds firm. You can almost hear Stalin across the steppe. Let them rot. Still, Paulus clings to a strange hope. You walk past his command post where maps are still updated hourly. One staffer draws lines in pencil and says, "Maybe the weather will change." You check the thermometer. It reads -35. The pencil snaps. Surrender begins to whisper. German soldiers start drawing lots for food, then boots, then burial rites. One officer proposes a mass breakout. He's told to wait. And wait. And wait. You find a unit who's been waiting so long they forgot what day it is. One has frostbitten feet wrapped in poetry pages. "We ran out of bandages," he shrugs. Finally, in late January 1943, the Soviets storm the final sectors. The German command post is silent. You arrive just as Paulus, newly promoted to field marshal, supposedly to discourage surrender, chooses to do exactly that. The irony isn't lost on anyone. "Field marshals don't surrender," Hitler had said. "I guess I'm not a typical one." Paulus replies somewhere between sarcasm and collapse. And just like that, it ends. The biggest encirclement of the war is over. Over 90,000 German troops surrender. Less than 6,000 will survive captivity. You stand on a rooftop, the wind slicing your face, and look down at the rubble-stained city that refused to die. The smoke still rises, so do the flags. Stalingrad holds. The Soviets don't celebrate with parades. Not yet. They bury their dead, boil snow, and keep moving west. You follow them past rows of burned-out tanks, their turrets tilted like toppled crowns. And far behind you, in that frozen pocket of defeat, the lesson lingers. Arrogance may start wars, but only endurance ends them. You move west now, but not in triumph. Not with banners or marching songs. This is a retreat, and it tastes like ash and broken promises. The German army, once the unstoppable force that chewed through Poland, France, and the Low Countries is now trying to leave Russia in reverse gear. You walk beside them as they slog back through the same fields they once crossed with swagger. Now those fields are graveyards, and the boots stepping through them are wet, torn, and half frozen. It's early 1943. The failure at Stalingrad echoes through the Wehrmacht like a gunshot in a cathedral. The Sixth Army's surrender is more than a loss, it's a shattering of myth. The invincibility is gone. The maps look the same, but the meaning has changed. Every town you pass through has new scars, some from bombs, others from silence. You enter one village where the only sound is a single rooster crowing from the roof of a burned-out schoolhouse. Even the wind seems hesitant now. The Soviets are no longer defending, they're chasing. They move fast, sometimes too fast. You pass a T-34 tank half swallowed by a collapsed bridge. Its crew digs it out with shovels and curses. One throws you a frozen biscuit. "We'll catch them," he says, and spits in the snow for emphasis. Historians still debate how much of this retreat was planned and how much was panic. Some German commanders tried to organize fighting withdrawals, delaying Soviet advances. Others simply ran. You follow one division that's marching west in single file, quiet eyes, forward rifles, slung but not ready. You can smell trench foot in the air. Every few hours, someone collapses. No one stops. There are no spare hands left. Quirky detail. German soldiers begin calling the frozen Russian landscape Der Weiße Tod, the White Death, not because of gunfire, but because of the snow itself. It kills quietly. It sneaks into lungs, creeps into boots, whispers to you in your sleep that lying down for just a few minutes wouldn't be so bad. You meet one man who did just that. He survived barely. Now he walks with two canes made from chair legs, scavenged from a looted farmhouse. On the roads, chaos reigns. Horses outnumber trucks, sleds outnumber wagons. Dead engines litter the ditches like gravestones. One panzer crew abandons their tank, dragging the radio out with them because it still plays music. You find them 2 days later, huddled in a cellar, singing along to a scratchy Strauss waltz. The tank's long gone. Food becomes a whisper of a rumor. German rations are cut to half, then quarter, then whatever you can find. A sergeant fries snow with margarine. Another grills bark. You sit beside a cook who's making field stew. It's mostly boiled leather and optimism. He says the real secret ingredient is pretending it's French cuisine. And yet the orders from Berlin remain disconnected from reality. Hitler demands counterattacks, holding actions, no retreat under any circumstance. Field commanders nod salute and then quietly do the opposite. You pass a general reading orders in a trench latrine. He uses them for toilet paper. "Best use I've seen yet," he mutters. Meanwhile, the Red Army keeps coming. Fresh troops, better tanks, sharper coordination. You notice the uniforms are newer, the boots thicker, the rifles cleaner. This is not the same Red Army from 1941. It has learned, adapted, and more importantly, outlived winter. One commander jokes, "We let the snow do our fighting, but we'll do the finishing ourselves." Villages once occupied by Germans now fly red flags. Some welcome the Soviets with bread and vodka. Others with suspicion. You pass one town where the church bells ring for the first time in 2 years. A child draws a picture in the snow, an airplane and a star. You wonder if it's meant to be real or just remembered. Still, the Soviets aren't gentle. Reprisal killings begin. Prisoners are marched back toward labor camps, some never making it. Looting happens, sometimes sanctioned, sometimes spontaneous. You see an officer slap a soldier for stealing a samovar, only to take it for himself. War may change uniforms, but not always behavior. German troops try to set up new lines of defense. The Dnieper River becomes the next hope, wide, icy, and supposedly unpassable. But the Soviets build pontoon bridges, engineers work in blizzards hammering through the night while artillery sings above them. You cross one such bridge at dawn. The river is half ice, half mirror, reflection of things lost. Everywhere the retreat becomes a pattern. Burned towns, wrecked bridges, abandoned guns. You find a hospital train derailed in a forest, the moans of wounded seeping through broken windows. A nurse offers you a bandage and a warning. They're not just bleeding, they're unraveling. German morale isn't just broken, it's liquid. Men sleepwalk through marches, hallucinate food, forget their ranks. One soldier claims he saw Napoleon waving from a treetop. Another insists he's already back in Hamburg. You walk past a squad that's singing lullabies instead of marching songs. Their officer doesn't stop them. And still the Soviets press west. They take Kharkov again, then Kursk, then cities you've only seen on postcards. You begin to wonder what's left to return to. For the Germans, this is no longer conquest, it's escape, and escape here is rarely clean. By now, the mud returns. Spring thaws the land, turning frozen roads into rivers of filth. Tanks sink, boots disappear. You help pull a wagon from the muck, only to lose your grip and fall flat into history's most literal metaphor. The soldiers laugh, then they cry, then they keep walking. The front lines blur again, but this time it's not from fog, it's from disillusionment. You overhear a German captain say, "This was supposed to be glory. Now it's just miles and misery." You believe him. You've seen the cost, and as you cross into the borderlands, Belarus, Ukraine, Poland, you feel the weight of everything left behind: weapons, comrades, illusions. The Soviet advance isn't over, but the German dream of empire in the east that's buried somewhere under 10 feet of snow and 20,000 regrets. You move quietly now, not because there's danger, but because of the silence. A deep, heavy silence that fills the gaps between trees and bones. You're somewhere near the edge of eastern Poland, standing in a snow-covered field that once saw tanks, then blood, then nothing. The war still rages, yes, but here where so many marched and died and froze, the land feels hollowed out. Like it remembers, like it waits. The Soviets are pushing west at full throttle. What was once defensive grit has become strategic momentum. City after city falls. Entire German corps vanish into fog and fury. But here in this field, you don't see armies or flags. You see boots half buried in snow, a mess tin, a helmet filled with ice, the quiet aftermath of ambition. Stalin's Red Army, now bolstered by supplies from the west and factories from the east, is relentless. You follow them through smashed cities where the windows are eyes and the streets are veins. They barely pause. Berlin is the new prize. Hitler, holed up in his bunker, still barks commands through a crumbling Reich. But out here, the war has already passed judgment. You walk behind Soviet troops who don't cheer anymore. They just keep moving. What once was fury is now obligation. Historians still debate whether the Eastern Front was the decisive theatre of World War II, but there's no doubt it was the deadliest. More than 25 million Soviet citizens would die before it ended. A staggering number so large it loses meaning until you pass a woman sitting beside a ruined farmhouse holding a pair of children's shoes, like she's expecting the owners to come home. They won't. Quirky fact, some villages never rebuilt after the war. Not because of lack of funds, but because nothing grew there anymore. The ground itself was poisoned by fuel blood and silence. You pass one such ghost village. There's a sign with no words, just a red line through a black dot. The map says nothing. The place says everything. You climb a ridge where once a German command post stood. It's rubble now, but the view remains. You can see the scorched line where the front passed like a knife through a canvas. Below you, the trees sway gently in the wind. The snow has stopped falling. The smoke has stopped rising. But the cold remains. You wonder what the war achieved here. The Germans lost more than men, they lost myth. The Soviets lost more than blood, they lost generations. And winter won. Not with rifles, but with time. It cracked the tanks, froze the food, stole the sleep. It didn't pick sides, it just waited. You stop by a small memorial, a wooden cross with no name buried in a grove of frostbitten birch. Someone's left a crust of bread and a cigarette. You light the cigarette. Not for you, but for them. The flame flickers, then steadies. A rare stillness. The war will move on to Berlin, to bunkers, to parades and treaties. But this stretch of land, this deep cold trench of memory, won't forget. The Eastern Front wasn't a campaign, it was a crucible. Here in the snow and mud, you saw what happened when ideology outpaced logistics and when nature didn't care. So you walk a little slower now, past the remnants of trenches filled with water where boots still poke through the surface, past burnt-out tanks that look like skeletons wrapped in iron, past forests that grew around shell craters like they were just another type of rain. And as you go, the wind begins to settle, the cold eases just slightly, the snow falls softer. You take one last look over your shoulder, not to see who's following, but to honor who didn't make it. Millions from both sides still buried beneath the frost. And now it's time to rest. So now, let your shoulders drop. Feel your breathing slow, your jaw loosen. You've walked across the widest, coldest, hardest battlefield the modern world has ever known. Not as a soldier, not as a general, but as a witness. You've trudged through the mud of Smolensk and the alleys of Stalingrad. You've warmed your hands by dying fires. You've heard boots crack over ice and engines choke on snow. You saw winter not as a season, but as a strategy, not as weather, but as war. You felt its grip on fingers, on fates, on history itself. Because in the end, it wasn't just Hitler's miscalculations or Stalin's stubbornness that defined this front. It was the land. The bitter, beautiful, brutal land. And now that land is still. The fighting has moved on. The shouting has faded. The wind hums like a lullaby through the birches, and the snow finally falls with gentleness, like a white sheet pulled up over a long and weary body, like silence tucking in the past. So close your eyes, you are safe now. The gunfire is far away, the trenches are behind you, the night is quiet. Let the frost fade from your breath. Let your feet rest beside a fire that won't go out. You've done enough walking. You've seen enough snow. Sleep easy, dream deep. History is watching over you now.